Hello, and welcome to this presentation on the development of an FWPA R&D investment plan for the hardwood products and processing sector. My name's Associate Professor Greg Nolan, and I'm Director of the Centre for Sustainable Architecture with Wood at the University of Tasmania. I'm a wood researcher. We've been doing research projects and industry support for the hardwood sector and for the wood product sector now for the better part of 15 to 20 years. So FWP has commissioned me to conduct this review, and this presentation is to introduce a range of topics that's going to be important in the process of the review, which will involve discussions with industry members through May and June of 2015. So if we look first at the talking points, things that we're going to discuss in this presentation. First is research, development, and extension. I wanted to clarify exactly what they are. Then we want to look at the realities of the hardwood market, of the hardwood resource, the knowledge base for hardwood production and processing, and the funding opportunities that exist. The next is there's the hardwood sector's primary product suite. We'll touch on that and things that are involved in the product suite. We'll look at identified technical constraints on market supply. That's things that we currently know are readily identifiable as limiting or constraining action in the market. The next will be raising a series of topic areas that may be focus for research for increasing the productivity of companies. And lastly, we'll discuss a little bit about new products. So if we move to the first of those talking points, so it's useful to clarify the difference between research and development and extension. Research and development is seeking to increase the knowledge base by developing a new piece of information or a new process, or adapting existing knowledge to suit a new situation. So it may be taking a process that's useful in another industry and adapting it to satisfy the requirements of, say, the hardwood sector. So that's research and development. Extension is seeking to disseminate knowledge that is already things that are already understood and assisting in their applications in businesses. So what that may include is if a particular business has a problem with a certain part of the production process and that problem has a known resolution, then extension is the work that's done to clarify and fix that problem in the individual company. So we need to be careful as we move through this presentation and the discussions for the R&D plan at the difference between what will fall into R&D and what will fall into extension. I'd like to move now to market realities. The first market reality is that softwood board and engineered wood products have replaced sawn hardwood board in the structural market on price, volume and workability. This is a trend that's been happening very solidly over the last 15 to 20 years and now is pretty well complete. If we have a look at that photograph, that's a prototype module building, and it's completely manufactured out of softwood boards, sticks and engineered wood products. There's very, very little hardwood material that's ended up in that design, and that's basically on price and workability. Then we'll look at our second market reality. That is, the performance requirements for appearance applications drive the use of high-value hardwoods, and things like visual appeal, hardness and durability are key characteristics. Now, this implies that hardwood, the prominent hardwood sector, market sector, is actually moving more and more into the appearance applications and less into the simple structural applications. That's the consequence of the first two market realities. Given that second market reality, we've got to look at what are those characteristics that make hardwood highly desirable in appearance applications and ways in which they can be optimized. The third market reality is that visual markets are either fixated on or spoilt with low feature material. Now, this works both ways. If people aren't supplied high feature material in ways in which it can be used carefully and with confidence, then they're not going to be able to be, they're not in a position to ask for it, and therefore they're not in a position to pay good prices for it. So there's a fixation that could exist in the market or be seen in the market, and it could also be that is all the market is being offered sensibly, and therefore there is a predominance of low feature material being supplied into the market and receiving the highest prices. There's then a resource reality, in that there are actually two available hardwood resources. The first is there's decreasing volumes of mixed species native forest logs. And I think if anyone looks at figures going all the way back to 1970, you'll see that there's a steady decline in the supply of hardwood logs from native forests in Australia, and their availability to industry has decreased. The size of the logs have decreased, the age of the logs has decreased. That is an ongoing issue and is likely to continue. So a consequence of that is that obviously if native forest logs is supplying particular products or superior products, then it's in everybody's interest to get the most utility out of those logs as possibly can. The second reality is that there's increasing volumes of more uniform plantation hardwood logs becoming available, but these have mainly been managed for fibre. So if we look at studies of the management regimes for most of the plantation hardwoods established in Australia, we'll see somewhere between 11 and 15% have actually been managed under some form of saw log regime. The rest have been managed for fibre. So that gives us a separate resources in the plantation estate between those that may produce logs suitable for current markets, but also then a whole range of logs, a much larger supply of logs that will be useful or may be useful for areas that don't form a part of the current sector or don't form a significant part of the current sector. If we look now at knowledge realities, now these are things that we know or ways in which we use knowledge. So our first knowledge reality is that the characteristics and the production behaviour of native forest material is reasonably well known. If we take a log of particular type and we saw it up and we dry it, we know how to dry it, we know how to saw it, we know the types of behaviour that's going to display as we do those things. And if we use them in buildings, we know how they're going to perform, given the markets and products that we're used to using. So we know all those things. The second knowledge reality is that characteristics and production behaviour of plantation hardwoods are much less well understood. This material's been selected, genetically selected for early growth. We're not quite sure exactly how the material's going to perform. We don't really know what markets we're going to try and push this material into for the material that hasn't been managed for saw logs, which, as we said earlier, is the majority of the estate. So there are unknowns in that whole scenario. Our next knowledge reality is that industry could increase its awareness and application of the available knowledge base. There has been a lot of research in hardwood and wood processing in general over years. Most of it is applied in industry, but there's a lot of very fine information which could increase productivity, which isn't necessarily being used or being used well or being used consistently in particular parts of the production cycle. So industry could increase its awareness and application of the available knowledge. I think we've got to recognise that point. The next knowledge reality is that the hardwood processing industry can't readily exploit international technological transfer due to the characteristics of our resource. So what that means is that the hardwood processing sector in Australia is relatively unique in that we deal with a wide range of species, and then predominantly all eucalypts, and the eucalypts their performance and their production characteristics will be quite different to softwoods particularly, but also to other hardwoods produced around the world. So we can't readily take a technology that's been developed, say, for American or European hardwood production and adapted into Australia without a significant amount of work. Our species just behave differently. There are then a couple of funding realities. That is that FWPA's hardwood funding pie is unlikely to fund research streams for individual species or minor species groups. It may be able to satisfy the requirements whereby we're looking at collapse-prone and non-collapse-prone species, or we're looking at key questions such as gluability, but they won't be able to handle, there isn't enough money around to handle detailed work on an individual species or species group unless that species or species group is highly dominant. The next is the number of skilled hardwood researchers available in Australia to work on the hardwood sector is now reasonably low. There's been a considerable wind down in hardwood research or in wood products research in general. There is then another funding reality, that is the most strategic resource and product questions really do focus on the plantation resource, that is the resource that we're not necessarily using or could use across coming years, of which there's quite a lot of material which we currently don't put into our current product suite. So they're really the strategic resource and product questions. But there's limited or only initial interest from current producers in how that material can be used and exploited. So it is actually, this work, though it is strategic, is actually going to be benefiting some future industry, and those future industries at the moment aren't making an influence on decisions being made now. And also, they don't pay levies. There's no levies coming from the production of this material because it isn't happening yet. If we look now at the hardwood sector's primary product suite, so this is a range of products. There is no particular order to this, but if we work from the top, the first thing we've got is appearance boards, and they're generally sold seasoned. There's structural board, that's also generally sold seasoned. There's industrial board, that's board produced for pallets, packaging, fencing, and a range of other applications that's sold both seasoned and unseasoned. There's then laminated products such as glulam that are used for both appearance products such as bench tops or structural products such as beams. There's then a range of veneered based products. There are producers in Australia making structural veneers out of hardwoods. Some are making plywood products out of hardwoods, and then there's also appearance grade veneers, which is now a very small sector in Australia. It used to be much more prevalent, but both of those veneer basic sectors are producing products that are going into the marketplace. And lastly, there's the whole residue based product sector. That's agricultural, energy, and I could put also on there paper and cardboard production. So there is residues that are being produced out of the solid wood processing area, and they're then being used as a resource for another group of products such as agriculture, energy, paper, and a range of other things. So each of those then forms a product group. Each of those has a particular research parameter, some of which are more important than others. If we look at technical constraints on market supply, I've got two listed here, but I'm going to talk about three. The first is reliable structural adhesion for laminated hardwood used externally, or for hardwood veneer-based engineered wood products. Basically, the glues that are manufactured and available in the marketplace and have been tried and tested do not necessarily work as well with hardwoods as we would like. They are fine for internal applications, for structural applications protected from the weather, but as soon as you start to get, if they're exposed externally, or whether you're after something like a type A bond in a laminated veneer product, such as plywood or LVL, you find that you're not going to achieve it. You can get type B bonds with some reliability, but you can't necessarily get type A in particular species. And this is an issue if you want to diversify a lot of the small diameter material that we may have available that we might end up peeling, or plantation resource we peel, we'll want to glue this material. Especially we want to glue material where we've got small section material and we want to make it into larger elements. So that's a problem. The next is we've got relatively inflexible grading processes. If we look particularly at appearance grade product, we've got select, which is a value laden term. We then have mid feature and high feature, and in reality high feature is actually several visual looks all mixed together. The next I'll add to this list is brought up by an industry member just recently, which was the potential to dry hardwood veneers, peeled hardwood veneers, reliably without significant surface damage or surface distortion. So we do get a lot of collapse, cell collapse in the dryers that have been developed for the softwood sector, which is then leading to a lot of difficulty in gluing and gluing reliably. If we look at research focus, and I'm going to put all of these research focus for increased profitability, there's a few areas I'd like to bring up. The first is ways in which we can increase the value in areas where we know we already get a good return. So that's we want to maximize that good return as much as possible. So ways that we can do that, of course, include reducing avoidable loss in production, avoidable value loss in production. So if we're going to identify ways in which we can conduct research for that, we actually need to identify the areas where we're already losing value in the production system and ways in which that can be ameliorated or resolved. Sometimes it will require extension, that's the application of things that we already know, and other times it will require additional research or development, and we want to try and identify what those are. The next is we can improve the way we model production systems. That means ways in which we can understand, if we conduct a particular action at this point of the production process, what the consequences of that will be later on in the production process, or in terms of overall recovery or return. Another area where we can focus on increased profitability is to increase output and lower costs through automation. There are ways in which particular technologies that have been developed for wood products production around the world can be applied to the hardwood sector reasonably straightforwardly. So there could be scanning and machine handling and racking and a whole range of other equipment that could be applied which can lower costs and increase output. Another area of research focus is we could look at areas where we have a known poor return and try and increase the return from those sectors. That's another obvious strategy. So one thing then we can look at is we can identify that there is significant underutilization of featured material in the appearance market. Partly we don't have good tools, partly we've been spoiled, maybe we've spoilt the market, partly nobody wants it. So there may be research areas in ways in which those things can be resolved. The next one is obviously there's poor residue utilization. There's a lot of resource that comes out of the log that we can't get into a sawn board and forms this residue pool. So how do we use that residue pool? How do we get some recovery out of it if there isn't a major customer like a paper mill in readily available distance? There's another area we can look at, which is to exploit technological change by looking at tools that have been developed for other industries. So if we take just one simple example, there's been a lot of development of sensing equipment for fruit, vegetables and food recently, in the last 5 to 10 years, where increasingly sensing devices have been developed that are used for vegetable delivery to make sure of freshness and those sorts of things. Now it's highly possible that the sensing equipment that's been developed and is now available at very low prices can actually be deployed into particular areas in the hardwood production industry, such as in an area like air drying. So there are ways in which the information technology and the sensing equipment that has been developed for other industries can be applied to either our best practice production for hardwood production, or ways in which we describe things to the marketplace. The next is new products. We've got two new products here, relative new products, particularly when viewed from Australia, is we have CLT, which is tilt slab of wood, and the other is wood pellets. Both of these were developed to satisfy performance requirements in particular markets where there was a particular resource. There's the demand for large-scale building out of wood in Europe, and there was a resource available, and CLT neatly fitted those criteria. In the bottom with wood pellets, there was the demand for increasing use of renewable energy in a manageable form, and the pellets make a very good solution for that. They're internationally developed and now used products, and these are things that may be able to be adapted and used then in the hardwood sector. But there may be other products that could be developed, adapted from overseas, or developed new here. So in summary, this talk was really about introducing some of the key concepts that will be investigated as part of developing an FWPA R&D investment plan for hardwood products. So it's really there just to get people thinking about the sorts of things that an investment plan can cover. I'm interested in discussing this with representatives and members of the Australian hardwood industry, and I can be contacted at the email address there shown on the screen. If you want to discuss this, I'm quite happy then to phone you, or if I'm going to be in your region across May and June in 2015, we'll try and meet and do it face to face. Thank you very much.